If anybody has any issues with recording and being represented today, please let me know. We can scrub you out or figure that out, but hopefully everyone is all okay with this being shared. If not, let me know. I'm just going to kick this off. I think we'll have some more people join us. There's a great turnout on here. I'm thrilled to see that. My name is Riley Loveland. I am the chair of the Oregon Green Schools Portland Metro chapter. I also work for New Buildings Institute as my full-time job. Sometimes it feels like full and a half-time job. And we're so happy to have you here. We have a great panel of subject matter experts on schools that are talking about funding and leveraging everything for school sustainability, energy, health, and wellness. So this is part one. This is all about identifying your district needs, your options, and how you evaluate leveraging. And then next time in part two, we'll talk a lot more about the decision-making process. So the Oregon Green Schools Portland Metro chapter, we used to formerly be called Portland Green Schools Committee. We're super excited to be joining forces with Oregon Green Schools because collaboration is key to success in schools and in every market sector. We touch the Tri-County area of Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah counties, and we're just really happy to be here representing a large nonprofit as well. Oregon Green Schools is a statewide organization, although we are just the Portland Metro chapter region, and they activate climate and sustainability leadership by providing this inclusive network of resources. We are a resource, which is how we're here today. And I will say that the Portland Metro chapter is a volunteer-led organization. If you're interested in joining, please let us know. We have a meeting, I think it's next Friday. I should know that off the top of my head. Yes, next Friday, thank you, Natalie. We have a meeting next Friday. Please join us monthly where we talk about our different activities that we work on. This one is actually sponsored by our bonds committee, our school bonds committee. So we have a specific committee within our chapter that focuses on bonds and school financing. Our mission is to promote sustainability in school design and operation through advocacy and education of the stakeholders for those healthy, efficient, productive learning spaces, which is obviously very apparent in the midst of a COVID pandemic, a climate emergency, and various other things. So we have a lot of work to do, so we're happy to see you all here. You can follow us at our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We have a stellar communications specialist. Shout out to Izzy. Thank you so much for running our social. And we also have a website. That website will eventually be transferred over to the Oregon Green Schools website, though, so I wouldn't bookmark that at this moment. Like I said, we have a meeting every second Friday of the month. You can email us for an invite. You can also sign up for our newsletter. I'll put this link in the chat. We send out a newsletter every other month or so, kind of depending on the ebb and flow of the Green Schools news. And with that, I'm going to very briefly introduce you guys, and then I'm going to actually have them introduce themselves because they can do a much better job than I can. We have Jaylen Freeman Broadus from GLUMAC joining us. We have Rick Flacco from Energy Trust of Oregon. We have Jerry Glynn from Amoresco, and Natalie, who is an architectural designer in our community. So with that, I'm going to stop talking because I'm only here to introduce and kick it over to Jaylen.
Hi, everybody. So as Riley said, my name is Jaylen Broadus. I work as a commissioning agent for GLUMAC. So I spend a lot of time in schools testing, optimizing some of the systems that we talk about as far as HVAC, lighting, plumbing, and lately security systems. So our presentation today is going to be about funding energy efficient school buildings and school building systems. So my portion is going to be to talk about the why behind it and why this stuff is important. So a few key points as to the why for high performance school buildings. Number one, it's a cost avoidance factor. When you provide high performance systems and buildings, there's obviously a long-term savings. And with some of the funding sources that we're going to talk about, the upfront cost doesn't actually have to be as high as you might think. Next, the environments that are created with high performing systems and schools, they're more comfortable and productive for students and staff in the building. So, you know, we all care about, the health and the productivity of the people in our buildings. So this is a great way to promote that. Next, having these systems in schools and high performing buildings themselves can be a learning opportunity for students. So it's a great way to get kids engaged with engineering, science, STEM ideas, and getting them inspired with that stuff to actually use the building that they're in. And lastly, the communities around schools are directly impacted by the schools themselves. So when you have stronger, more resilient schools, that's going to permeate into the community around them. A few fast facts just about some of the impacts that sustainable initiatives can have. Studies have found 25% increases in academic progress based on the physical environment in classrooms. Asthma cases have been found to be reduced when the air quality in a school building improves by up to 65%. And daylighting controls has contributed to progression in math, reading, and overall student performance. So as you can see, these are quantifiable things that are I think we can all get behind as far as keeping our students healthy. Just to dig a little further into that, indoor air quality, there's a ton of research into how it affects students, but we know that attendance is one of the biggest factors in student success, right? And 1 in 13 children of school age have asthma, and this is one of the biggest things keeping students from attending school. And the air exchange rate, for every hour increase in the air exchange rate, they're seeing a 12% decrease in sick days. Essentially just wanting to show there's a strong connection between absenteeism and air quality, right? There's several types of contaminants that can be active in schools. I'm not going to go through all of them, but yeah, definitely a lot to look out for, and a lot of opportunities for improvement. Especially nowadays with COVID-19 as well, that's introduced a whole nother aspect to school buildings that we have to deal with. Go to the next slide. As I mentioned before, we see another opportunity with high performance schools, as a tool to actually engage students. So as you can see in this little picture, we've got this student up on the roof looking at an air handling system. It's a great way to get students excited about different careers that they could potentially get into. And it also just feels, hands-on and personal when they're able to, see what's going on in their own building. Next slide. So real quick, I want to pause and just say, I'm seeing some things come up in the chat, and that's great. I want to encourage us to continue to use that. Feel free to introduce yourself in there and say who you work for, where you're from. And also wanting to touch on some of the challenges that we often hear working with school districts. Sometimes we talk about some of the things that they could potentially implement, and we hear, oh, well, we would do that, but this. So we wanted to address some of those and just talk about possibly another way of looking at it as an opportunity. So one challenge is the difficulty of rolling out something different, right? People are used to doing things one way. It can be difficult to propose a different way of doing them. But this can also be an opportunity for collaboration, right? We want to encourage districts to work with other districts that have done some of the things that you might be considering, right? There's lots of templates out there. And so this is an example of a forum where we're looking to connect districts with others. Another challenge is a perception of a high first cost with a lot of these systems. Modernizations are an option as far as like an alternative to just brand new buildings. And there's also a ton of funding sources, which we'll also talk about. So there's tons of opportunities for cost savings. And last, there can be pushback. This kind of goes back to the first one, but you know, it can be hard to you know, make some of these things succeed if people aren't bought in. So we see it as an opportunity for engagement for community members as well as staff and students. And then also training. Training is a really big thing when you're implementing, you know, more complex systems. They're not going to succeed unless you can ensure that everyone that's going to be using it after it's turned over is actually trained on how to do so and knows who to contact, you know, in whatever situation that might come up. So yeah, that's it for my part. I'm going to pass it to Jerry, and he's going to get into some of the ways to actually make these things a reality, right? There's a lot of opportunities out there right now, especially in today's age. So I will hand it over to you, Jerry. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jaylen. I really appreciate that, and Riley for introduction, and thanks everyone for spending your lunchtime hour with us. Hopefully we'll learn a few things and be able to kind of connect the dots as we kind of gather some knowledge from our Oregon Green Schools group here, a really good spot for districts and also other designers and engineering or in the trades to really be able to share some wins, some challenges. It's a good spot as a nonprofit for schools to reach out, ask us to come in. We're really just looking to be another resource and reference for both the designers, the engineers, architects that are all working on the same project in terms of creating high performance, healthy, energy efficient schools. One of the things that we brought in today's session is, you know, not only how Jaylen was saying is, you know, some of the whys, which are very helpful with school boards and kind of getting everyone on board for the reasons and rationales behind this, but also in kind of balancing and leveraging all the different funding sources. Oftentimes in this realm, people are often you know, in a position of, hey, we just don't have the money. I'd love to do it, but we're just dealing with emergency things right now, from fires down south and funding sources and COVID. It's hard to really wrap your mind around it and participate. But hopefully, if you have the time, you can reach out to any of us and have us come in to help as well. Next on the slides. As I was saying, and earlier before, as everyone knows, there are a lot of new funding sources. Generational funding event, I would say yes. In the last couple of years, the state legislature has really increased their funding for operations of school districts. They have also, you know, looked in terms of how can we help school districts fund their bond programs so we can get more passed. But there's also a lot of outside money from federal sources, from COVID, CARES Acts and things. And we'll get into that and kind of see how the whys and now the hows of like getting the money can really get your school situated after maybe years of deferred maintenance or growth of your district. And we'll take a look at those. Next on the slides. From the federal side, a lot of the work that we've been doing really in the last 18 months has been, how do we take advantage of the CARES Act money? And that is also comes in with the American Rescue Plan. It's been kind of divided at this point into 3 buckets with a potential 4th one and maybe more that are coming in the infrastructure plan. These are all kind of in stages. They have both a funding stage and a requirement to spend the funding. So when you hear ESSER 1 or ESSER 2, ESSER 3, know that that's just an acronym for elementary and secondary school emergency relief. So these are the funds that schools can access and spend to not only improve the safety of their classrooms and districts against COVID, but also, kind of the backbone behind the school. What does make a school safer? Jaylen mentioned it in terms of indoor air quality is one of the keys to making sure the air that we're breathing in schools are keeping us awake, keeping us safe, and investments are needed. You can't just throw out kind of I wish we had this, or politicians sometimes put out numbers like in 2030, we're going to be at this level. But unless things are funded, you really do need to make investments in actual equipment and building architecture to take advantage of it. I'm stopping on this as well to say there are lots of different buckets, and really having the ability at your school level to have someone kind of own that and make sure that it's being ushered through so you're not taking or missing an opportunity. As you see, the ESSER 1 funds need to be spent by next September, the next batch by the following. So there are some time dates on this, and there are also some requirements. So you want to make sure that you're kind of following this, little bit of arcane process in order to help your school. There's also a lot of local buckets of money to take advantage of. Next, I'll kind of point to some of those on the next slide. Is, as you can see, a lot of different combinations. And what I like to, when I'm talking to districts, is kind of stacking each of them. You don't just go with one, but you try and during your process, and that's kind of before the project, during, afterwards, you're always looking for new and different ways to take advantage of funding options. The number one in state of Oregon is school bonds. They're not as easy to pass. There's a lot of districts that and areas of low income families or families that are in retirement and have fixed incomes. It's really hard to, when you're on a fixed income or on a budget that is, looking at in terms of, paying your rent or your mortgage or just staying afloat. It's really hard to push that button and help the extra school. So in addition to doing that, you can also look at other sources for doing kind of green or healthy or high performance buildings. As part of any new investment in public buildings, including K-12, there is this House Bill 2496. So they know that 1.5% of your total spend needs to go to either renewable energy or now, in the recent legislature, they've kind of expanded it for both energy improvements and some other things where solar may not be the best for your particular building or school. Senate Bill 1149 is kind of funded by a surcharge on your independent or investor-owned utilities, the PGEs, Pacific Powers of the world. That's a bucket of money that each school that is in those areas can access. There is also a new House Bill 2618, which goes to solar and storage rebates. So you can kind of make sure you go through each of these and have a pipeline between ESSER funds, Pacific Power Blue Sky grants, Odo Red grants, Energy Trust, and these things kind of come and go. So you really need to be tracking them on a calendar, on some kind of schedule or project management space. Either you do it or bring in an outside source that really kind of manages this for you and does it as a service. One of the other ways that we do it at my company, at Amoresco, is through energy saving performance contract, which is the last one. And we've really seen them in some districts like Grants Pass, Phoenix Talent, they're using them almost like mini bonds. So a bond may not have passed, but because the interest rates are so low, we can actually get a very well-funded project to increase your infrastructure spend and focus on indoor air quality as well. Next. And kind of those buckets, as well as your operating budget. Some people look at investments in indoor air quality as a way to reduce your substitute teacher budget. So there's different ways you can kind of what I call stack or leverage. you kind of take the different ones and you make sure that you can get those rebates and grants in this particular time frame. And that also you're looking at, the whole total price. Lots of times in construction, you're looking at, what's your first cost? What is the cheapest way to get it done? And there's different ways to kind of look at total cost of ownership. Most of the investments in infrastructure, you look at about a 20-year life cycle on many of the HVAC systems. So you kind of look at what is my 20-year cost going to be? How is that going to be the best stewardship for my local money? And you can combine those traditional investments, either bonds with non-traditional financing. So there are plenty of dollars out there for districts to borrow, with also a commitment on increasing your spend in energy efficient equipment so that your utility bills go down. That may be either your water, your gas, your electric. And you can use those funds that are saved now, instead of spending those on utility bills, you can actually reinvest those back into the school, or take that extra savings and pay off the loan. So that's when we say, that connection with leveraging or stacking, that ability to take multiple different pots of money and combine them into one project. It's a little tricky. At Phoenix Talent, there was a 1.5% get requirement because they did pass a bond and were building a new school. That came out to about $350,000 that they needed to spend at this one particular school. It really wasn't enough to create enough kilowatt hours to really make that investment pay for itself. So we were able to help them go out and get a Pacific Power Blue Sky grant for $250,000, a Department of Energy Red grant for another $200,000. ETO put in another, I believe, $65,000. And all of a sudden, because we were able to stack the bond dollars, the Pacific Power dollars, Energy Trust dollars, and the Department of Energy dollars, all of a sudden we had a $750,000 solar array on their new high school. And it actually is creating enough energy to really make a difference and at least pay back the investment of the 1.5 and then have this for really 20 years going forward. So it's pretty neat when you start to do it. But there are a lot of different kind of dates and things you have to consider. In order to get the Blue Sky grant, we had to be under 250 kilowatts. In order to get the Red grant, we had to be above 225. So we had a sweet spot of 247 in order to hit it. But those are some of the kind of details to get into that we can also help you with. Next. And then you need to just evaluate where you are. Any part of the cycle, you can have work being done. It's a lot of times like the bond is done and then you breathe and you're like, oh, I don't have to do that for a while. Well, really that's the opportunity to start planning for the next one, unfortunately. So, you want to evaluate where you are in the process of bonds. Are you doing your retro commissioning? That's what Jaylen does and his team during the downtime of after the new building is built and taking care of it. Are you doing pilot projects after a failed bond to show that the community is that you are savvy in being able to use public dollars to fund things, and you're not just looking at the community, and showing them that you're good stewards of funds and doing things that are creative and making a difference for the kids and the staff of the district. So really find out where you are. We'll give you a pathway to kind of where you want to go. And a lot of the things that they're doing right now is kind of making sure you have a baseline, making sure where you are right now. In the other buckets of money, there are TAP grants to make sure you have a facility condition assessment, you have a long range plan, you have a seismic report. Those can all be accessed with free dollars from the Department of Education to do those. So reach out and make sure you're taking advantage of that free money to get that baseline set. Next. And, again, back to Jaylen's original statement, there are not only, long-term health benefits to this, there's also long-term cost savings. I think we get stuck, especially when we're just doing bonds, of like, hey, we've got a pot of money, let's spend it, let's make sure we get as much as we can. But sometimes if you're not looking kind of over the horizon of, well, what's this going to talk? What's this going to take? I mean, we're going to build a new high school. Do we have, operational funds to hire more, custodians to make sure the buildings are clean? Can we hire more maintenance staff to make sure these high-tech equipment that save energy can be maintained? So not only looking at those upfront costs, but making sure that you're not kind of putting yourself around the corner and coming up short on operational costs and investments after the new buildings and new infrastructure is built. So you really want to look kind of when you're building new things over a 20-year time horizon, and then see kind of how things fit in. These lower maintenance costs and easier maintenance, I mean, it is very expensive to maintain equipment that is not installed correctly or isn't the best fit. And lots of times during construction, even though the district might have gone in and done good work as far as designers and creating new energy efficient things, they get what's called value engineered. They get cut out at the end when budgets are tight, timeframes are short. And you want to make sure during this process, which is key, time is tight. It's really hard to have energy efficient decision makers at the table when the concrete truck is rolling in. So make sure you're baking these commitments and cost savings into the original bond language. There are words and kind of actions you can do within your district to make sure that the bond spend that you voted on actually goes to the energy efficient or long-term cost savings that you originally signed on for. So make sure you're putting within your kind of policy of how you're going to spend this up front, so that at the end you don't get things cut out that you really thought you were paying for when you voted for it. And so, kind of taking those long-term savings into account is very crucial. And not only that, but after the bond spend, let's make and at any point really that you're investing in retro commissioning. I know in the automotive world, every 5,000 miles, even now more with synthetic fuels, you're bringing your car in, you're getting the oil changed, you're making sure it's running because you want the car to run as long as possible. They're very expensive. Your building is very similar to that. You really need to be checking on it and having updates and making sure that the building is working as efficiently as the building was originally designed. So doing those retro commissionings are also very important. Next. And this is just an example. We have PAE is on our nonprofit as well. And sometimes they were saying, good, better, best. And we do as well at Amoresco, giving the districts the choice. Sometimes the easy knee-jerk reaction is, hey, we don't have a lot of money. We're a small district. It's not, the bond was not as much as we wanted. So we're just going to go with a good code-based envelope, code-based HVAC system, just the cheapest thing we can do because that's all we can afford. But when you go back to that total cost of ownership or a long-term focus on what's the best investment, sometimes the most expensive upfront cost, you would think, is actually the least expensive overall. So really take a look at those good, better, and best, and make sure you're looking at them in a 20-year window and not just initial costs. In this example, because they increased their energy efficiency with their insulation, they had direct outside air coming in. They had new technology to kind of make sure that the costs of the utilities were down and energy use was down for carbon reduction. So the payback actually was quicker, even though they chose the best system. Next. And that kind of wraps it up as an example, and just really taking the mindset of there are more than just one place for money, and kind of tying that money into the whys, and then really come out with a team that's taking advantage of that. I'm going to turn this over to Natalie, who will then kind of take us to the next step of you've convinced the community and the school board on the whys, you found the money, and now really how to plan for using those funds. I'll turn that over to Natalie. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. That was a great overview of some of the opportunities available. My name is Natalie DeFrance-Dreyer. I am an architectural designer working in the world of K-12 schools, and I also support Oregon Green Schools Portland Metro chapter. Next slide. as Jerry mentioned, we've kind of talked about the why, the health, and the efficiency opportunities, and we've talked about some of the funding out there that's available to you in your district. So let's talk about some of the strategies that we can use to get to successful projects. So really, Jerry really kind of mentioned this, but we want to talk about this over time, right? This isn't maybe something that you would see next year or the following year on a project, but we want to talk about those 20-year energy efficiency opportunities. So that's a long-term strategic approach, setting measurable goals and regularly reporting on progress with tools such as retro-commissioning. And then really focusing on the benefits to the learning environment, right? The student health and productivity benefits also transfer to, you know, your educators and staff members. And that's something that can really be a tool when you're talking to stakeholders, is kind of really focusing on those health benefits as a plus for the community. Next slide. So getting started, identifying applicable funding opportunities. As Jerry just mentioned, there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of tools for being able to stack those funding opportunities to get to your goals. And then benchmarking your energy data and assessing district facilities is really kind of your starting point. What is your district portfolio as it stands? Kind of what do you have in your district that's an asset right now, and how can you leverage those assets for the future? Passing board resolutions to adopt those goals, so really kind of setting, you know, achievable but desirable goals for your district, and then really kind of baking those into everything that you do going forward. Developing sustainability standards can really support that. We previously talked about the sustainability standards that Portland Public Schools has recently adopted, and how those can really drive each and every decision in each and every project. Next slide. So yeah, getting the team on board, and getting stakeholders involved. It's great to have somebody that can champion this in your district. You know, can you identify a person that will bring this up at every meeting, that will address these decisions every time they come up, and really say, you know, let's make sure that we're addressing efficiency. Let's put this in the project. Setting up a team to support those decisions, figuring out, you know, what roles do you need, and how you can develop a work plan. Getting internal support. So whether that's with the school board, with the project team, or with your stakeholders, you know, how can you build those support and have those conversations? Developing key messages, kind of as I mentioned, you have the health and the productivity benefits, you have the efficiency benefits. There's kind of a lot of angles that you can talk about for why efficient schools can really help your district and help your community. And then sharing case studies. You know, there's a lot of successful examples out there, and really being able to fall back on those examples as something to hold up of, you know, we can get there, this is achievable. Next slide. So setting up for success. So we talked about evaluating your baseline, and, you know, setting up that district portfolio. So kind of what you want to do is start with that facility condition assessment. That would be the portfolio. And you can find funding from the state to complete that. Developing a long range facility plan. Where do you want your portfolio to get to? Where is it today? And where do you want to see it in 20 to 30 years? A seismic evaluation. As we know, seismic safety is very important for our communities here in Oregon. And there's some funding for that as well. SB 1149 audits. So that's a no out of pocket for school districts, something that you can kind of jump on. And then getting the retro commissioning and identifying partners. We have a lot of resources available in this presentation. So we'll be sure to share those for identifying partners to find grants. Next slide. So setting up those overarching goals, where do you want to go? I think we've talked a little bit about EUI as a tool of measurement for your facilities. We like to think of EUI kind of as a mileage per gallon for schools. So if you think about, how much am I going to put in and what am I going to get out of that? EUI measures the KBTU per square foot per year for a facility or as a portfolio overall. So, looking at where would you want to get that, 25 would be great. 25 would kind of be like a great baseline to see for new construction. And then reducing your overall consumption, right? Like it might not be possible to get some of the assets that you do have, the older buildings, down to those extremely low EUIs, but you can reduce them, maybe to 50% of what they are now. And then really focusing on electrification and the elimination of natural gas and generating power needs. So in reducing your natural gas needs, you can really start to focus on how can I generate energy on site at my schools and take advantage of solar opportunities. Next slide. And then I don't want to forget retrofits and modernization, right? So I think a lot of times we talk about new construction, we talk about new schools, new facilities, significant additions as kind of like a really exciting place to put your energy and your assets. But retrofits and modernization can really achieve a lot of your goals with the assets and the facilities that you have. So whether that's, major HVAC and mechanical systems, modernizations, or, kind of larger core and shell modernizations. Each of those is really going to be an important step to get your whole portfolio to where you want it. Next slide. So yeah, as the title of this presentation suggests, leverage everything. There's so many opportunities out there, and there's so many ways to find support. So finding synergies with other projects, what do you have in your district that can work together to get to where you want to go? Identifying some of those low-hanging fruit, whether that's maybe some more minor upgrades and modernizations. Getting the third-party support systems in place that Jerry's mentioned and that we'll go on to talk about with Rick Flacco. And then undergoing the pre-planning. So really, taking stock of what you have and where you want to go. And then finally, having those sustainability standards baked in so that you have that as a guide for your process along the way. Next slide. So yeah, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rick Flacco to talk about some of the opportunities with Energy Trust of Oregon. Thanks to everybody here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. I really appreciate it. It's so good to see everyone here today, and I'm really happy to be here. My name is Rick Flacco. I'm the K through 12 lead for Energy Trust of Oregon's New Buildings program. And it's really great to be here today. I'm going to start off with a little information about Energy Trust for those of you that aren't familiar and haven't worked with the program before. Energy Trust is an independent nonprofit organization who's dedicated to helping utility customers invest in and benefit from energy efficiency and clean renewable power by providing cash incentives and services for energy efficiency improvements.
Hey,
This
Rick,
helps.
are you sharing right now?
I thought I was. Let me...
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, we have, we're funded by a small percentage service charge on the utility bills of customers of Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural, Cascade Natural Gas, as well as Avista customers. And we also serve customers of Northwest Natural in Washington State. You might notice on your utility bill a public purpose charge on there, and that is Energy Trust is one recipient of that. One of the another recipient of that is the SB 1149 program, and then the remainder goes to low-income weatherization programs in those service territories. And this map highlights the service territories of Energy Trust of Oregon. We have a program available for everyone in these shaded areas. In the areas that are not hashed or shaded, these are areas where there's both no natural gas service, and the electric provider is a provider other than Pacific Power or Portland General Electric. We refer to these smaller local utility providers as PUDs, or public utility districts. And a lot of times these local electric providers have their own energy efficiency programs and their own incentives available that are offered through Bonneville Power Association. So if any of the projects that you're working on are in these areas that do not have natural gas service and are outside of Pacific Power and PGE service territory, be sure to look to your local utility for any available cash incentives that they can help you out with through Bonneville. Energy Trust has we have incentives for every sector out there, including residential homes. Many of you maybe have in the past received an energy saver kit from Energy Trust, or maybe had a home energy review completed on your home, either online or in person. But that's just really one of the many sectors that we provide incentives for. We have other programs for existing buildings and businesses. We have an industrial program, an agricultural program, production efficiency. There's actually 17 different market sectors in all. If an owner pays a gas or electric bill, then we would have a service or incentive available for their project. It's also important to be available or to be knowledgeable that there are some differences between our new buildings program and our existing buildings program. If walls are moved around on a project, or just about any time building code kicks in, that project would usually come to the new buildings program and be served by myself. But for one-off retrofits, for example, if you're only completing an equipment replacement or re-insulating an attic cavity in the course of a re-roof project or seismic improvement, those would route to our existing buildings program. Really, the most important thing is just to get a hold of us early so that we can begin working on your project and getting our future incentives budgeted in. It's never too early to engage with Energy Trust and enroll your project. It's really, really important so that we can reserve some incentives in our budget going out a period of years. So please do get a hold of us if you have any new construction or renovation projects that you're looking at. And now I'm going to detail just a little bit about some of our incentives. Our installation and construction incentives cover everything from simple solutions for smaller spaces to comprehensive whole building energy modeling approaches. And we can even run special custom measures through our prescriptive offer for efficient systems and equipment. Incentives in general for K through 12 follow two different pathways, either prescriptive and those special measures like I mentioned, and the other one is our whole buildings program. And in the whole buildings pathway, the incentives are based on the annual predicted savings of an energy model on a kilowatt and therm basis. And we also have sort of above another tier of our whole building program, Pathnet Zero, for projects that are pursuing higher energy efficiency goals and standards. And qualification in our Pathnet Zero program is based on based on whether or not the building can exceed the EUI goals laid out in Architecture 2030. So for example, for let's just say a 2019 code project, if a baseline EUI is say 35, the Pathnet Zero qualification EUI would be, let's just say 15, and anything 15 or below would sort of induct you into the Pathnet Zero program. And solar and other renewables are also a great way to buy down, if you will, the EUI of the total of the building, so that you can attain a lower number of better miles per gallon. I love that analogy, and ultimately bring in some additional incentives from Energy Trust of Oregon. As building codes increase, we just are on the cusp of another code taking effect of the 2021 code. Our offers sort of evolve along with that. So it's always a good idea to check with us for any updates, and again, get a hold of us as early as possible when you know about your project, even at the pre-bond level stage, so that we can begin just penciling in some incentives into our system. Is not too early. That's really where we like to get projects enrolled. So please get a hold of us if you'd like to work with us on any of those. And now I'm going to highlight a couple recent projects that went through Energy Trust's New Buildings program. This project here, the new CTE building for Dallas School District in the high school, just completed this year. And I think this is a really, really good example of how a district can maximize incentives on a prescriptive project. There was non-energy modeling completed on this. You know, it's a relatively simple building, you know, 4 walls and some rooms inside. And, you know, this is a building where, you know, energy modeling might not have been the correct pathway, but through installing above code interior and exterior lighting, using efficient infrared radiant heaters in some of the spaces, and a efficient mini split in the server room, as well as a very efficient condensing water heater. With all these things, as well as the early design assistance incentive of $2,500 that we were able to provide, the total incentives on this project were just south of $10,000, which I thought was a really, really great incentive. And we also see highlighted there the $3,000 annual cost savings, and we have that broken out into total kilowatts and total therm saved. And this is really where, you know, where I like to highlight where you know, really the rubber kind of meets the road with energy efficiency here, is where you know, the initial numbers sound great, you know, under $10,000 of Energy Trust incentives. I'm unsure of what other support the district may have been able to get for this project. I know that there was some, but you know, that initial incentive number is great, but where we really start to see energy efficiency penciling out is the annual cost savings and through the kilowatts and therm saved. These are savings that the district is going to realize over that 20 to 25 year measure life. So it really starts compounding, and you know, those savings and incentive and savings and cost, energy and cost savings, are something that the district is going to realize for the life of the measures installed. So again, factoring in those long-term energy and cost savings is really important, and we can really start to see energy efficiency panning out financially pretty easily on a lot of projects. And the next one I'd like to highlight is a Pathnet Zero project. This was actually a 2014 code project, Creekside Community High School with Tiger Tualatin School District. They had a final EUI on this project of 21, using a variety of strategies of ventilation, daylighting, envelope, as well as a very high efficiency HVAC system. And I mentioned earlier how renewables can I say contribute to an EUI, but I guess take away from an EUI is probably a better way to say it. Through the solar array on this project, they were able to get the EUI into Pathnet Zero qualification with that 21 EUI number. And we also have highlighted the total energy trust incentives provided on this project was over $61,000. And again, the utility cost savings and the energy savings are something that the district continues to realize and will for the lifetime of the measures in the building. This was an all electric project, so we don't see any therm savings on this one, but really robust incentive for the kilowatt and therm savings. And I will mention that the Pathnet Zero incentive rates are 40 cents per kilowatt and $1.20 per therm. And projects that are still doing our whole building energy modeling pathway have incentives that do not meet Pathnet Zero, or maybe aren't targeting it, are eligible for incentives of 25 cents per kilowatt and 80 cents per therm. So that's just a little bit of information on our whole building's incentives. Well, I'm going to wrap up here. It's been really great to be here today and talk with you a little bit about some of the incentives that Energy Trust offers in our program. I did also put my contact information in the chat earlier. Please reach out to me if you have any specific questions, or if you'd like to discuss one of your projects with me, and we can work on getting that enrolled early so that we can start penciling in some incentive dollars. And I will, with that, give it back to Riley and the team to close this out. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Rick. All right, I'm going to reshare my screen here. We just have a couple quick resources. I will not read these because you will get a version of these slides after. Our presenter contacts are here as well. It's just some general like school bonds information and some of our past events. But we did want to point you to part 2, which will be a little bit more of an in-depth dive into how you actually find support along the way. So we hope that you'll join us for that. And, I want to thank all of our presenters today. You guys did excellent. This was a wonderful presentation. This is a very deep well of information, the federal funding and the state funding and the support from local incentives. And it's very hard to navigate. So as Jerry said, and I think I saw some chatter in the chat about it, it's all about finding your resources and your people, and just know that this group here and the group in the wider breadth of Oregon and beyond are here to help support you in all of the federal funding and local funding streams. So let's see, there's a chat. I'm gonna stop share so we can see each other. Does anyone have any questions? I know I saw this question about federal funding and ESSER funds. I tried to answer it pretty quickly in the chat, but let me see if I can read the question really quickly. Can those ESSER funds be used for energy efficiency upgrades, or are they specific to COVID upgrades such as better indoor air quality? And often these things overlap. It's not necessarily a COVID specific requirement. It's a requirement for healthier and more productive environments, about reducing environmental risk and health risks. So the stimulus funds are primarily there to mitigate those kinds of health and environmental risks. But of course, there's a huge overlap with efficiency upgrades. There's HVAC and filters and air cleaning and fans. The list goes on. So as I said in the chat, it's really all about our role for considering efficiency in those. There's been a lot of talk about, we've been on these calls with various groups about scrubbing the indoor air as opposed to bringing in outdoor air, because as we know, thinking about the widening of I-5 in Portland here, the pollution from outdoor air and the pollution that we see in our daily lives is really tricky to bring into schools. So a really efficient way that you can do that is by downsizing your systems for bringing in outdoor air, so that you're bringing in less and actually scrubbing that indoor air. So that's one option. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything about the federal funding or different ways to help clean the air Or if anyone else has other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat.
As a follow-up, just because I'm working with a lot of different districts, some are being very creative with, making sure that indoor air quality could also be, setting up an outdoor play structure with a roof so that the kids can actually be outside and playing. So, those projects on the side that you may not connect directly to COVID, but they do have some ability to keep the kids or staff with fresh air changes. You can also do outside projects. So, talk to us, see what other districts have done and been able to get through and attach to these COVID funds. But they're getting maybe a little sharper as the ESSER rounds go on. The earlier funds had a little bit more leeway, but I think with those precedents, if you can connect it at all, they're getting signed off at the federal level for this investment.
Anything else out there? Again, part 2. Also, if you have questions and you want them answered in part 2, if you're still kind of like noodling on them, let us know, because we're adapting part 2 to your responses and to your interest.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun.
Catch y'all later.
All right.
I'll stay on in case anyone wants to chat, but head on out if you need to.
Cheers. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.